Okay, so Andy, you know what? I think we'll get started. So, welcome everybody to the webinar tonight. I've got my good friend Andy Tran, who's going to be talking about how to create a secondary suite the right way. So, Andy, let me give you guys a bit of a background on Andy. I'm sure quite a few of you that are on the call know about Andy Tran, but for the ones who are on the call and you guys don't know about Andy, Andy is an expert in creating secondary suites and single-family homes. He's also the author of Second Suites, a Beginner's Guide. So if you're interested in getting a copy of that, you can actually check out his website, which is at suiteeditions.com. And just a quick background on Andy. So Andy's seen numerous second suites as a home inspector. He's also advised many homeowners on really how to do secondary suites correctly. And along his travels, he's obviously seen some poorly constructed secondary suites, and he'd also like to say that he's also seen some outright dangerous ones as well too, and most of them actually were just illegal. So Andy's mission today and tonight is to provide as much information as he can based on his research, his experience, and training to assist those who have an interest in building it properly. Now, just some housekeeping. So before we get started, we've got quite a few people that have registered for this evening's event. So all the ones who have actually that are on the call tonight, I want to thank you guys for being action takers. I always like seeing that. And also for this evening, at this point in time, no microphones are going to be needed. Really, it's just going to be myself, but mostly Andy that's going to be doing most of the talking. So what I'll do is I'll probably put you guys all on mute, just to make sure that we don't interrupt Andy during the call. And then what I'll do is at the end is I will unmute the call. And if it gets too crazy, then I'll mute everything again. Now, the other thing as well too, if you don't want to talk, you can also put your message down in that chat box at the bottom. And what I'll do is I'll do my best to get through all of the questions at the end, and hopefully Andy will have some time to answer all the questions as well too. And last but not least, I've been at webinars before. So if you can do myself and do Andy a favor, shut down your browsers, turn off your Facebook, turn off Instagram, Twitter, Snapchat, all the other stuff that can distract you, and give Andy your undivided attention this evening. Okay, so with that, Andy, I'll pass it over to you.
Hey, thanks a lot, Gary. Too bad. I had Snapchat going, so now you told me to turn it off. I will do that.
For 45 minutes. For 45 minutes, you can turn it off.
All right. Cool. Okay, thank you. I'm the one presenting, so I shouldn't be on my phone. So thanks for the reminder. Yeah, thank you so much for that introduction, Gary. I appreciate that. And so this is normally the part when I do my talks. I ask everyone to whoever's been to one of my previous presentations to raise their hand, but I think that's a little bit challenging with the webinar. So fortunately, I'm not able to see that, but I do see that there are many of you that are on. So thank you very much. I really appreciate your time and attention on what I have to say. So what's different about today's webinar from the previous talks that I've done, including the presentation that I did with Gary and the Smart Home Choice Investors Group. That was a great event, and there was a number of people that came out for that. The thing that's going to be different about tonight's presentation is I'm going to get into a little bit more of the nitty-gritty. I'm sure most of you who are on tonight already have a good handle on what secondary suites are, why they're important, some of the policy, some of the government policy around secondary suites. So I'm not going to get too much into that. And of course, if you are new to the subject or you are new to my website, you can certainly download the book and get a little bit more of that information as a primer. But we're going to get right into it right now. Okay, so quickly, the agenda is we're going to talk really about the process of finding a property, designing it, and going through the permit application and getting the approval from the city so that you can actually get your secondary suite legalized. Obviously, there are many benefits to that, and again, I won't go into those details, but obviously you want to ensure that there's going to be a high value in your property. You want to make sure that everything's done right. And if it's fully legal, you're going to be able to get really good cash flow without concerns of getting your unit shut down, either because of a neighbor who's complaining or if the municipal enforcement is driving around looking for any suspicious activity. By doing it legally, you don't have to worry about that. Okay, so the very first thing we're going to do is we're going to talk a little bit about some of the important things that you have to look out for when you are looking for the property. What are some of the things that you should be doing in terms of planning ahead once you've put an offer on the property and gotten accepted?
Okay, go ahead, Andy. I've muted everybody again.
Okay, all right. Is volume okay on my end?
Yeah, no, it's perfect.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. And then the committee of adjustments, this is where if there is a bylaw violation, what you would have to do in order to get a variance. And we're going to get into this a little bit today. And really what we try to do is either design it or look for properties where bylaw violations are either at a minimal or is not present, so that we don't have to go through this process, because it is added cost, and most importantly, it adds a lot of time to the project, potentially 2 to 3 months. Then we're going to talk about some of the things to consider during the design process. So this is not only just to meet the building code, but also for functionality of the second unit. We're going to talk about some of the important things that you need to do when you are looking for a contractor to do a secondary suite conversion. And then we're going to talk about the permit process. So submitting the permit, applying for it, what to expect during the examination period, what to expect after receiving the permit. And then once you receive the permit and you have your construction underway, we're going to talk about what the inspection procedures are during that time. And then finally, when you complete everything, you get occupancy, and then a final report or registration with the city, or at least some sort of indication that your permit has been closed, so that you do have proof that your unit is now fully legalized. Okay, so those are the things that we're going to be focused on, and this presentation is probably going to be about 25-30 minutes, and then we're going to leave about 15 minutes for Q&A. Okay, so when looking for a property, the most important thing, the first thing really, is to make sure that the property is in an area where it's allowed. So we want to look for zoning. So with secondary suites, pretty much in every city within Ontario, they have what's called an R1 neighborhood, and sometimes they name it differently. Sometimes they'll call it, Zone C or Zone D. Essentially, R1 neighborhood, that's really a generic term that pretty much all municipalities in North America would refer to sort of the low-rise residential neighborhoods, right? The single-family home suburban neighborhoods. And with the government allowing homeowners in all municipalities within Ontario to be able to convert their single-family home to 2 units, it really focuses and targets these R1 single-family home neighborhoods. Okay, so you want to make sure it's in one of those neighborhoods, and at the same time, you want to contact the city to make sure that it is within the zone, because there are some R1 neighborhoods that don't allow it. I'll give you an example. There are some school districts, not school districts, but post-secondary school, such as, I'll give you an example in the city of Barrie, Georgian College, and there are a few others where they want to limit the amount of students that are in a particular neighborhood. So the Residents Association did object to having secondary units, and basically this is something that that was not something that the council members at the city were able to overturn. Okay, so you want to contact the city always, just to make sure. Every city is different. Now, in terms of the overall zoning, that pretty much covers whether or not you can do a secondary unit within a particular neighborhood. And then there are individual things that you want to look for. So the most important thing really comes down to parking. Depending on the city, some cities will allow tandem parking, which is one car in front of the other. Some of them will not allow that and only allow parking to be side by side. As a matter of fact, this is an example of a house in the city of Hamilton where not only do they not want tandem, even with side by side, with one car not blocking the other, only one car can be parked in the front. So you really have to go through the bylaws in detail, and those are generally available within the city's websites. Okay, there are some other restrictions sometimes in terms of the overall frontage, the size of the lot, and the size of the unit. Those are very important things. Sometimes they're contradictory between cities. So as an example, in the city of Hamilton, you can own, there has to be a minimum of 700 square feet for your secondary unit, whereas in the city of St. Catharines, it's a maximum of 650 square feet. So obviously the criteria to determine what they constitute as an acceptable unit, it varies between each city council. You just want to make sure that you follow those rules. And just to kind of go back a little bit and talk about the zoning, you'll find that there are a lot of cities with interactive maps. So I know that with the city of Oshawa, there are interactive maps in order to find out the zoning of a particular property. So what I can do is I can show you an example. So that's the website right there, and I just pulled that up on the browser. Let's see here. Map Oshawa application. And what this is going to do is it's going to allow me to do a search for an address. Okay. So I don't have any particular address in mind right now, but I can actually just pull closely. I can just zoom into any of these properties here. And I'll be able to, oops, something's wrong with the screen here. And so I'm just zooming in on a random property here, and you'll see that this outline that you see here is roughly the outline of the footprint of the house. It probably includes the roof overhang, so it's not super accurate. These lines give you a general indication of where the lot line is, although it's going to be more accurate for you to get the survey if one's available. But most cities, I've found that they have accepted either the lot survey that you get from the registry office or on the interactive website. And sometimes this will give you a little bit of an indication as to what whether or not it meets the requirements. So as an example, I want to know, let's say, roughly the lot frontage of this property here, number 345. There's actually a measuring tool here that I can click on, and I'm just going to use, I don't want kilometers, I want feet. Okay, so I know that we need about 36 feet of frontage on the lot. So if I just do a quick measurement there to there for this property, it gives me roughly 41 feet. Okay, I know that I need 36 feet in Oshawa, so it looks like I'm pretty close. Maybe I'm at the borderline, but at least that gives me a general idea. If it shows like 36 or 38, then I know I have to be a little bit more. Maybe have to do a little bit more due diligence. But if, let's say, the frontage shows 100 feet, then I know I'm pretty safe in terms of the lot frontage for what's required, right? So these tools are very handy. I know that City of Toronto definitely has the tool, tells you what type of properties, what type of other things you can do in the property in terms of additional units like triplexes, fourplexes, things like that. Mississauga has a site like this. City of Hamilton has a site like this. So take advantage of it because this is free for you to use. Okay. go back. Okay, so those are some of the bylaw things that we've talked about. So in terms of the other things that you want to look for are building code, and by far the biggest issue really it comes down to ceiling height. Other things such as adequate windows for egress and natural lighting, adequate room sizes, having a proper entrance. Most of those things can be addressed with a certain amount of renovation, but if you don't have the ceiling height, like if you're, let's say, in a really old home, an old century home, and you only have like 5.5 feet or 6.5 feet, really there's not much you can do unless you dig under, underpin or bench the footing in order to get more height, and then that can become prohibitively expensive, and it may not make sense anymore from an investment standpoint, right? So ceiling height is one of those things that you probably want to identify first. That's why for secondary units, in terms of what I've done and what my clients have done, the sort of the mid-century bungalows are generally ideal for that. You want to make sure that you have at least 6 feet 5 inches throughout the basement, okay? And usually people will say, does it have to be 6 feet 5 inches throughout? And the answer is yes and no. In some cases, it can be less than 6'5" in certain areas as long as it's not blocking the egress. But if it is blocking the main exit, then that part has to be at least 6 feet 5. Okay. Okay, so let's talk about what you need to do in terms of planning ahead and making sure you minimize the sort of the lag time of getting your permit approved and then getting your construction going. So assuming you found the perfect property and you placed an offer on it, and now you're ready to do a legal conversion, either something that's existing, or you want to take an old house that is unfinished, or you probably want to gut it and redo it. So you want to plan ahead. So I generally recommend try to get at the very minimum 30 days closing. Okay, 30 to 60 days minimum is what I would recommend. If you can get more, that would be great. Request at least 3 visits. Okay. Generally speaking, we're able to go in there, have a look, and see what needs to be done in one visit, and also do the measurements. But sometimes we have to come back, and sometimes you probably want to have your contractor there to assess it. So we would recommend at least 3 visits. And once you get your offer accepted, I would recommend that you get your licensed code designer or architect and your contractor in there to see it as quickly as possible. In terms of applying for the permit, usually most designers will require at least 2 to 3 weeks to put together the permit drawings after going on site to measure, after measuring the property. And once they submit it to the city, it would take possibly about 3 to 4 weeks before they even get back to you with any sort of indication on whether it's approved or any additional work that needs to be done. Most cities would require you to close on the property first before you can submit the application. Now, having said that, I've on many occasions actually have submitted the permit application before the property closed, and some, depending on it, I think the official rules with most of them is that it has to close first, but sometimes they've said that's fine, we'll put it in the queue, we'll start looking at it, and before we issue the permit, we need to get some proof, like title on the property, or if it's closing sometime down the road, then they may ask that you get an authorization form from the current owner. Okay, but try, if you can, try to submit it as early as possible, and then also schedule your contractor ahead of time if you can. Right, you're not going to know 100% in terms of the scope of work. But generally speaking, if your architect or designer has a good handle on what needs to be done, you're going to be about 80 to 90% there on what the city requires, and then the 10 to 20%, that's something that you can fill in after the permit has been approved. So if you were to say, close on the property, in 60 days, and if you're not able to submit the permit until the closing, then you probably want to allow another month on top of that before scheduling your contractor to come in, okay? And I mean, most contractors who are experienced and know what they're doing, especially in terms of secondary units, you know, a lot of them are booked well in advance, you know, at this point right now, possibly 2-3 months or even more. So that's why you want to get them in there early. Now, on the very bottom there, if variance is needed, it can add an additional 2 months, okay, because that really depends on the schedule of the city. Most cities will have a couple of hearing dates every month, and so depending on the number of permits that go in that have bylaw violations, they need to schedule that in. And you know, try to identify those things early. Most of the time, we are able to identify if there is a bylaw violation, such as a parking issue. But sometimes something pops up that, you know, is very obscure in the bylaw that we didn't know about, and then, you know, at that point we have to apply. There's nothing we can do in that case. But if you can identify it, then it's good to try to apply for the variance first, and then once that passes, then you submit your building permit. Okay, so we talk about identifying them as quickly as possible and doing them before the building permit. And when you apply for a variance, you know, whether you as a homeowner or investor are going in to represent yourself for your property, or you have a planner or an architect or a designer go in for you, make sure you have strong arguments for what you want to do and why you should have a variance passed. So, for example, in most of the variance hearings that I've attended, most of them have to do with parking. And whenever I go in there, I always have a whole list of things why, for example, if I'm not able to provide a second parking spot, or if the parking spot's too small, I'll give a lot of explanations why this is okay. You know, maybe I'll say that the building code at the time did allow for the parking spot to be smaller, so there's not going to be any cars that are going to be parked on the street. And then if there isn't an actual parking spot, sometimes I'll say I'll actually print out Google Maps and show them various bus routes, and I'll say that, you know, perhaps this house is in a central location. A lot of the tenants here won't even be driving. A lot of them will be taking public transit, right? Those may be in houses where we are closer to a central area. So you always want to have those strong arguments just in case. Now, in most cases, the cities, the committee members, you know, they're usually on your side, especially when you're trying to put in a legal second suite because it's additional affordable housing units. The only thing is, if neighbors show up, that's really when they need to hear both sides, right? So in most of them that I've attended, nobody's shown up, but I had a whole list of things that I was ready to sort of put forth as an argument, but I didn't actually have to do it. And most of them literally have lasted like 30 seconds because the cities, the committee members, they've all agreed that it was okay, and nobody showed up. I've only had a couple of times where the neighbors showed up and they had concerns about sort of you know, possibly you know, your vehicle blocking their driveway, and then you just sort of talk about ensuring that none of that is going to happen, and usually they're okay with it. Okay, so in most cases, it's really just more time to the process. Okay, in terms of the actual design of the secondary unit, so you have to submit permit drawings to the city. So this is a whole list of items. Some cities will require more details than others. So who can actually do the permit drawings? You as the homeowner, if you're on title to the property, you can actually do it yourself if you feel comfortable with the building code, or if you've had any sort of technical drafting experience. You know, you can hand draw it, you can do it on a computer, you can do it on CAD. Whatever you're comfortable with. You can hire a licensed architect. You can hire a licensed BCIN designer, which is what my company is. So BCIN stands for Building Code Identification Number. So I'm qualified to do any designs for houses that are under 4 stories. Or you can get a professional engineer. So when you are doing the design, there are a bunch of things that you definitely need to consider, right? So you want to meet the code requirements, of course, and one of the most important things is windows. So a lot of people think of windows as just for egress or escaping, but there are other functions as well, such as natural lighting and natural ventilation. So egress is actually one of the easier things to obtain. You really only need one extra egress window in the entire basement if you do have a separate entrance door. But usually more challenging is windows for natural lighting. So as an example, in the living room, you need to have at least 5% of the floor space in the living room for natural lighting, right? So usually we have to either enlarge an existing window or put in a new window. Okay. Separate entrance is it's ideal. Okay, you can actually, a lot of people don't know this, but you can actually use the main entrance of the unit upstairs. You can even go through the house and share that. Now, in most cases, you probably don't want to do that, especially if you're renting it out to two separate tenants. In those cases, they make more sense for, let's say, families who are living together. So you want to have a separate entrance, ideally, either in the side of the house or in the rear of the house. And that's why some of the older houses are more ideal. They don't have like an entrance to the basement from the interior or from the garage or something like that. Most of the time, it's at the side of the house or the back of the house. Okay, so there are also requirements for room sizes. Okay, so you can't just have a basement and say that there's going to be a bedroom here and a living room here, and it's going to be a legal unit. Every room actually has to have a minimum size requirement. So this includes the living room, this includes the kitchen, and the bedrooms. Those three items. Having a dining room is optional. Okay, so you need to have at least one bedroom that is a minimum of 105 square feet, and you need to have a living room that's at least 145 square feet. Okay, kitchen has to be at least 40 square feet. So when you combine those things with bathroom, with stairwells and mechanical rooms, generally speaking, at minimum, you probably need at least 400 square feet to make it work. Okay, and even then, it's going to be pretty tight. It might be sort of like a studio unit, sort of one big room. But I think I've done a 400 square feet basement apartment with a one bedroom before. So you just have to get creative with the space. Okay, and fire separation is very important to ensure that if fire starts in one unit, it doesn't spread to the other unit as quickly. There's going to be a time limit in terms of how fast the burn time is between one unit to another. Okay, so what they ask for is 45-minute separation, which means that you want to use materials, fire doors, and drywall ceilings and partitions that will give you a minimum burn time of 45 minutes. If the house is 5 years or older, the minimum requirement then is 30 minutes. Okay, but if you're doing things new, then they're going to want to have that 45-minute separation. Hey Gary, how are we doing for pace? Is that good?
Yeah, we're good. We're good.
All right.
Yeah, keep on going. Good information.
Okay. Okay, so that was really just an overview on some of the code items. Obviously, there's going to be a lot more involved. Not really. We can't really discuss everything in a 30-minute webinar, of course, but that gives you a little bit of an overview. In addition to code, we want to also design things to function well. Okay, so we don't want to just meet the bylaws and the building codes. We want to design it so that it functions really well as a basement secondary unit, right? You want somebody to go into this space and it feels like like a really nice condo unit. Like a really nice condo apartment, not really sort of some dingy apartment, right? And sort of that's what my focus has been, and that's what most of my clients have done, is that they've taken a space and really transformed it and really made it into, really almost like a legitimate duplex. So acoustics is very important. because especially when you have basement apartments, people are walking upstairs, and there may be kids running around, and you sort of want to minimize that noise. And there are two strategies that we go about to try to achieve this. Obviously, you want to be able to minimize the sound transmission from a technical standpoint. So that green stuff that you see there, that's a generic name is absorptive material, which is really most people use the rock salt safe in sound, right? So the fire and sound insulation, and that helps for the sound transmission. You want to have these metal resilient channels, and you want to have the drywall on the metal channels, not on the floor joists, because these metal channels help absorb the noise. Some people even double up and do do 2 layers of the sound insulation, and I recommend that because once everything's complete and you have a nice, beautiful basement apartment, sort of like what you see here, the last thing you want is for somebody to really be annoyed because of people running around upstairs and it gets really noisy. So I think it is an expense that is worth putting more resources into. And then you want to have an open concept space, right? These basements usually aren't really big anyway, so you want to minimize things like hallways. Okay, so you want to be able to go down and have an open concept space. Have your common area, your living, dining, and kitchen in one area, and possibly your bedrooms in the back. And back to the acoustics, you want to mirror the upstairs as much as possible, right? So you want to have your bedrooms above the bedrooms, and you have your living room above the living room, because obviously noises, TV, and things like that, you want to sort of minimize that. Okay. So from a technical, mechanical perspective, there are a few other things that you want to be cognizant of when you are doing the design. So mechanical, electrical, and plumbing. One of the challenges I find when it comes to converting an existing basement as opposed to doing something brand new, or ripping it apart and gutting it and doing everything brand new, is electrical. That's usually the biggest challenge, because a lot of times with basements that are partially finished or fully finished, either as a secondary unit or just as a family space, you'll find that there's a lot of handyman electrical work. A lot of homeowners do their own electrical, and trying to figure out what's wrong and taking things apart here and there, it does become really challenging. And we've had several occasions where halfway through it, the homeowner just decided, you know what, it's just too much work. It's going to be easy for them just to redo everything. Okay, so that's one of the considerations, definitely, when it comes to the electrical. And you want to look at the adequacy of the electrical system for the 2 units, right? Because now you have an additional family in there. You have 2 additional loads, so you have your dryer possibly, and you have another stove. Okay, so if you add those things at full capacity, that's adding another 70 amps into your electrical capacity, whereas your main house may only have 100. Okay, sometimes people will use gas. They may switch to gas dryer for both units and just have electric heating. So these are things that your licensed electrician will have to advise you on. Sometimes people will upgrade it to 125 amps. Sometimes they'll upgrade it to 200 amps. Sometimes they'll add in 2 separate meters to make the utilities a lot more straightforward. And if you are going to separate to 2 meters, then at that point it makes sense also to increase the overall capacity to 200 amps. Okay. Mechanical is very important in terms of heating and cooling, right? You definitely want to ensure that every space in the house has proper heating is the most important thing. Cooling is secondary, but every room needs to have a heating source. And very rarely has the city asked me to provide them with an HVAC design of the secondary unit, unless it's a really big house, let's say, 1,500 square feet basement where it was unfinished before, and now we're subdividing into many rooms and things like that. They want to have an actual HVAC design. But with most typical secondary units in the basement, you probably have 800 to 1,000 square feet. The furnace obviously is already sized for that house. A lot of the rooms that, regardless of whether or not they were partitioned, there may be a heat supply register there already. They may ask us to add in a couple of return air vents. Okay, so in most cases, I would say 95% of the time, we don't really have to get into too much detail in terms of the mechanical system, as long as we do have a heat source for all of the rooms. Okay, and a lot of people will say, will ask me, well, the basement's always a little bit colder than the upstairs, and so what's going to happen because the tenant downstairs is going to be colder, and then the person upstairs is going to, turn off they're going to set the heating temperature to whatever's comfortable, and then not really care about the person downstairs. And obviously, if you can have, if you're doing everything brand new, you have to insulate to today's standard, which is R20, which is pretty warm for a basement. But if you don't have that, then it makes sense to have additional heating source for your basement tenant. Okay, so I always recommend providing some safe baseboard types of heaters. The types that looks like the radiators with the oil heating, and not your sort of open element electrical heating, because that's unsafe. Okay, so if it is a cold basement, then I would actually supply those heating sources, additional ones for any occupants down there. Okay, so that covers mechanical and electrical in a nutshell. Plumbing also is very important. Okay, so there's two aspects, of plumbing. There's the obviously the supply plumbing, which is the water coming in that is going to be used, and then there's the drain, waste, and vent system. In terms of designing your bathrooms and your kitchens and laundries, wherever you have plumbing, you want to do them as close as possible to the main drain that's going out of the house. Okay, and so your designer or your contractor should be able to help you identify the best locations for that, because you want to minimize digging. Obviously, there's probably going to be at least some digging involved, but you want to minimize that, because the more digging that you have to do, the more it's going to cost. And one very important thing that a lot of people don't consider is the venting of the plumbing system. I'm not talking about exhaust venting. I'm talking about the venting of the plumbing system that allows air in and out in order for drainage to happen properly. So I see a lot of basements, especially before when I was doing inspections, where things were just not draining properly, is because there was no vent coming into the plumbing, into the drain system, and they were getting a lot of backups and things like that. Okay, so of course, you want to make sure that you hire a licensed electrician licensed plumber to do that work. In terms of the supply water coming in, obviously, the larger the service pipe coming to the house, the better, right? 3/4 inch or 1 inch pipe coming to the house, that's going to give you good water supply and pressure. Now, if you can't have that, it's also beneficial to increase the size of the main trunk that's in your basement. A lot of times it's a couple of main trunks on the ceiling of the basement. If you replace that from a 1/2 inch to a 3/4 inch pipe, whether it's copper or whether it's PEX plastic, you're still going to get a lot more water supply, and that's really going to help you in terms of all those additional fixtures and faucets that you're adding in, right? So you have a kitchen with a sink, possibly a dishwasher, you have your bathroom, a 3-piece, 4-piece, and laundry. So that's really going to take away the water supply. Okay, you want more water supply, not more pressure. If you don't have enough, what's going to happen is somebody's going to be taking a shower downstairs, and then there's not going to be any water upstairs, and then whoever's living upstairs is not going to be happy. Okay, so those are things that, of course, are very important during the design process. Okay, so now we're going to talk about finding a contractor. As we mentioned earlier, good contractors at least 2 months in advance. Okay, so expect that. Okay, anybody that calls you and tells you they can start next week, I'd be a little bit wary of that. Unless they just happen to have something free up, I would be very cautious on any contractor that has quick availability, because anybody that is anybody that is able to do the work properly usually they're booked at least 1 to 2 months in advance. Okay. So make sure they have proper insurance. Some of you may have read a recent post that an article that I put together that covers what the insurance requirements are. So most contractors do require comprehensive general liability. Okay, that's really to protect the homeowner investor in case there's any damage or injury to a third party, and then you have safety insurance for the contractor, right? So if you are an investor, then it is considered a business. So the contractors that you hire, regardless of whether it's a general contractor or any of the individual trades, they need to have WSIB insurance. Okay, and unfortunately, that is very pricey, and those are costs that are going to be incurred with any contractor. And then some cities actually require an additional licensing. Okay, so if let's say you want to be a a carpenter or a general handyman in the city of Toronto, you actually need to register. There's a licensing registration in the city of Toronto. It's usually several $100s, and they have to do a test just so that the city feels comfortable that they know what they're doing. Hamilton does have that as well. Okay, so find out for that particular city where you are hiring a contractor whether they require that or not. Okay. We'll talk about some of those other specialized trades that are more important in terms of the licensing and qualifications. So with the electrician, they need to be a licensed electrician with an ESA number or a ECRA number, and that ensures that they are covered under that association, and any work that they do needs to be inspected by the ESA, and the electrician will actually pull the permit for you. Okay. So the permit for the electrical work is not as complicated as a permit for a secondary unit. They simply have to place a phone call, and they will get the permit over the phone, and then that permit gets sent to you, and you pay the fee. Usually it's a couple $100s. And the great thing about this is that if this inspector does not pass the inspection, they can't take out a permit for another job. Okay, so this really holds their feet to the fire in terms of making sure that the work that they do is done properly. Mechanical, so whenever you're dealing with furnaces, you're dealing with fuels that can potentially be hazardous, right? So, so you're dealing most of the time with natural gas. If it's a rural property, it could be propane. Sometimes you have oil. Okay, so these mechanical contractors have to be licensed with TSSA, which is the Technical Safety and Standards Association. So they set a very high standard in terms of making sure that the contractors that are doing the work here are properly certified and licensed and insured. Now you'll find that with a lot of, let's say, HVAC companies, there's a lot of big companies out there, Reliance, 1 Hour Heating, in Toronto we have Atlas Care, Bellier Brothers. These are really big companies, and they usually hire sort of individual contractors to work for them, so they'll give them the work. But those individual contractors need actually to be licensed themselves through the TSSA. Okay, so sometimes people will go directly to these contractors, and they'll have the contractor purchase the appliance and have them install it, but they still need to put their stamp of approval on it in terms of being a licensed gas fitter, for example, under the TSSA. Okay, and any mechanical work for your secondary suite has to be inspected by the city. Some cities will have the one inspector that inspects both the building, the fire separation, the plumbing, and the overall secondary unit. Some cities will have individual HVAC plumbing inspectors. The only one that is different always is the electrical inspector. The electrical inspector is never with the city. It's always with the Electrical Safety Authority. Okay. Plumber also needs to be licensed. Typically would be in Ontario would be through the Ontario College of Trades, so they need to have a license number. Specifically in Oshawa, during the permit application, they actually ask for the membership number of the plumber who is under the Ontario College of Trades that you're going to hire. And they won't issue the permit until you provide that person. Okay, and I don't know why that's specific only to Oshawa. Who knows, maybe they've had issues in the past with poor sewage work and things like that where that's been an issue. I don't know if Gary, if you're familiar with anything on that respect with the city of Oshawa.
In regards to what, Andy?
In regards to having a plumber as part of the permit before they issue it. I've noticed that really it's only the city of Oshawa that's asked for that.
I'm not aware of that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just like so I mean, like when I've done any of my two units, I kind of let my contractors deal with that. So it news to me, but it sounds like you've obviously gone through that, right? So maybe something new. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I've gone through it twice with Oshawa, but in your case, maybe your general contractor already had someone on their team, so they indicated it. But they will still accept your application just before they issue it. They just want to make sure that you do have a licensed plumber. It could be because they've had unqualified people do the plumbing work, especially when it comes to sewage and things like that. There's a lot of liability when it comes to that stuff if it's not done properly, if there's backups and things like that, right? So I think they probably are a little bit more cautious.
Yeah, and you're saying though in other municipalities that they didn't need to be licensed.
Well, yeah. Well, every mechanical, plumbing, and electrical contractor that does work for you, they need to be licensed through their through the appropriate trade association, right? But it was just they just required this specific name of somebody in the city of Oshawa. So I'm just not sure why. It could be because of previous issues.
Yeah, and probably why I haven't come across it is because my contractors, I think they usually do have licensed plumbers, right? So it's never anything that's ever come up before. So I assume they're licensed.
Yeah. Okay.
Which is probably good anyways, right? So.
Yeah. Okay. So we're just sorry if we're going a little bit fast. I think we're running pretty close to our time here. So I just have a couple more minutes, and then we can open up to some Q&A. Okay. So in terms of the permit drawings, most cities will require, well, actually no, all cities will require a site plan, and at least at very minimum site plan, floor plans, and construction specifications. Okay. So the site plan is just to show your property in relation to the house and the secondary unit in relation to the overall property. Okay, so the reason for that is even though it's, you're not adding anything if you're putting in a basement suite, typically the additional requirements for the secondary suites, such as parking, which can interfere with the neighboring property line, or new windows, right? If the new windows are within 4 feet of the property line, there are fire issues and in some cases bylaw issues, and that's why they want a site plan. Now, to produce a site plan, the gold standard is to have a land survey, okay? But it's often difficult to get a land survey. I always ask my clients, try to get a land survey from the seller, but I would say it only happens maybe 10% of the time. In other cases, the city might have a survey that you can use. And a very worst case scenario, most of the time they've allowed us to use either the interactive maps online to give an approximation of where the property line is, or I'll go into the land registry, or the client will go into the land registry office and obtain the original lot survey for that particular subdivision. Okay, so if the subdivision was, let's say, put in 1956 and there's a plan number, on that listing of that property, there's a plan number there, so they might say plan number, I don't know, 250. You go into this the registry office and look for plan number 250, and then you can see an overall plan of the entire subdivision. And then you won't get the actual house measurements, but you'll get the overall lot, and then you take measurements on site of the house, and then you'll sort of reconcile the two. And in most cases, they have accepted that because it's been fairly accurate, and nothing really jumped out as being a big liability issue, right? So those, I would say more than 95% of the time that's worked okay. We haven't had to get land surveys. There's only been a couple times where we've actually had to get land surveys because there were some issues that were really close and we weren't sure, and we didn't want to get into any hot water with the neighboring properties, right? But in most cases it has been okay. But in any case, when you are looking at buying a house, always ask them if they have a land survey available. Sometimes they do, a lot of times they do, but they're just, maybe too lazy to dig it up. It may be in their legal legal documents. Sometimes it's, it's hidden somewhere. We've even been in cases where we open up the kitchen drawer and the land survey was in there. Okay, that's kind of rare, but sometimes they just have to jog their memory to be able to find it. Okay. Sometimes they will ask for elevations. Sometimes they'll ask for cross sections to make sure we have the proper height. And lately, I've even had to do details to prove proper fire separation and proper details for exterior walls for extra insulation. So it seems like a little bit of a moving target with a lot of these cities. They want to minimize their liability and they want to make sure that you meet the code. So I'm finding that the more and more I'm doing these, the more detail they're asking for. And then the building permit application is just a 3-page document indicating what you're going to be doing, who the owner is, who the designer is, and then you pay your permit fee. Okay, I find that the permit fees really range anywhere between $500 to $1,500, depending on the city, depending on the scope of work. Some will go based on the square footage of the scope of work that you're doing. Some will go on the estimated value of your project. Okay. And then you can expect a response within 2 to 3 weeks. Their mandate is 2 weeks, but sometimes they'll for secondary units they'll say 3 weeks. And this is the time where they're going to come back and say, there are a few missing items, and there always will be some things that are not fully accurate or they interpret it a different way. And so that's why I always give a lead time to my clients of about 4 weeks, because even after 2 to 3 weeks, once we get that revision letter back, there's a bunch of back and forth between me and the client, between me and the city, and it's a lot of emails and a lot of phone conversations to clarify things, and sometimes it's easier for me to just go down there and actually really hammer things out. Okay, so a month generally is a good time frame. Okay. In terms of the inspection itself, there are various stages. There's the initial inspection before any construction begins. Sometimes they will bypass this and they'll say, go ahead and get the construction, get the framing done and the plumbing done, and then it will come out. But you always want to give them a call first after you get the permit, so that they're the ones that tell you to go ahead before you doing it yourself. And then framing and plumbing. After that, insulation on the walls and vapor barriers, and also insulation on the ceilings, drywall and fire separation between the units, and fire doors and things like that, separations in the furnace room, and then your finishes, right? So your all the flooring, all the trim, your cabinetry, all that stuff, the appliances. Okay, and then the final occupancy really is just one last look to make sure everything is okay. After the final occupancy, there shouldn't have to be any additional work that needs to be done, maybe just some touch-ups. And then after you get your final occupancy inspection, try to get some sort of a report from the city indicating that it is now a legal unit. Depending on the city, some cities you'll actually be on a secondary suites registry. Okay, so for example, Newmarket, Mississauga, I'm gonna say Ajax and Oshawa. Not 100%. Yeah, Oshawa for sure. Brantford, and then there are some cities that don't have anything like that. They just say, okay, well, the permit's approved. You might be able to go on the website and show that the permit is now closed. Just print a copy of that and have that in your files. Yeah, you don't want to have to sort of dig these kind of things up, 5, 10 years later when you sell the property, right? You want to have all those documentation, obviously a physical copy and also a scanned copy, so later on you can prove that the unit's legal, so you don't have to kind of ask the city or have your buyer ask the city and go through that again. Okay, so that is everything. Sorry, we went past the time a little bit, but if you guys want to get more information, go to my website, and a lot of the stuff that I talked about tonight, it is in my ebook. You can get a lot more information there. And if you need help with any of your second unit conversions, feel free to reach out to me.
All right,
All right, Gary,
perfect.
that's it. You wanna open up the some questions?
Yeah, I'll do that. So thank you very much, Andy. As always, a ton of great information there. So I've already got a lot of questions that are coming in right now. So what I'll do, so I've got them coming in on chat. So what I'm going to try and do, and we'll see how it goes, is I'm going to, so everybody that's listening right now, I'm going to unmute everybody. But if it starts to get too crazy, then I'll mute everybody, and we'll just kind of just go back to the chat. Okay. So if you can do me a favor, if you're not talking, just mute yourself. And if you have a question, then go ahead and mute, and then ask your question. Okay.
Muted.
Okay. So
Okay.
we're all unmuted.
So we're all unmuted.
I do have a question. It's Trevor.
I do have a question. It's Trevor.
Yep. Go ahead, Trevor.
Go ahead, Trevor.
Okay. Andy, sorry, I'm hearing double talk, so it might stop me a little bit.
Okay. Go ahead, Trevor.
Okay. What I'm wondering is if Andy, if your company, like I have a property in Toronto, it's like one of the old bungalows of the the 40s and the 50s. I've been thinking about going up and making it into like a legal. Like I already have done that. I already kind of made it as a, I guess it's an unregistered second apartment in the basement. And what I'm thinking of doing is renovating it, not right away, but I'd like to get some kind of basic design plans of how to do it properly. Is your company willing to kind of work with me in the very beginning process before I'm even, so that I know that I'm doing everything right for the future? Does that make sense?
Yeah, so you mean in terms of doing it so that you're not going to register it, but you want to do it as close as possible to the code and
well, I want to possibly go up, and then I want to make it all legal in the future. But I'd like a design of how to actually do that properly for the limitations of my, I live in Toronto around Victoria Park and Danforth, and I'm sure there's probably a lot of lot restrictions and things like that. I have some ideas of how I'd like the house to go, like in terms of, like a separate entrance and all these kind of things, but there may be restrictions and all that kind of stuff. But I'd like to start the process of actually getting drawings done and things like that. I'm wondering, in order to is that some, because you said you're a BCIN designer, right?
correct, yes.
Is that something that we could, I mean, I don't want to take up your whole free time talking about this, but just, is there a way that I could talk to you more, like maybe tomorrow or something, like if you could,
Yeah,
why don't you, more private conversation?
Yeah, because it's going to be, I guess, really going to depend on your circumstances. So why don't you send me an email and we can discuss it offline. So,
okay, so
how, go to my website, you can just email
the suiteeditions.com or something?
Yeah, if you go to suiteeditions.com, there's a contact link there, so you can just shoot me an email there.
Okay, I'll do that tonight, and then maybe we can, if possible, talk in the next day or two.
Okay, sounds good, Trevor.
Thanks a lot.
All right, thanks, Trevor. Is this Trevor Pedley?
Yeah, we've met Gary many times.
I know. Good. It's been a while. Good to hear from you.
Yeah, it's been a little while. You're right.
All right, perfect. All right, good stuff. All right, I got a couple questions here that got thrown over to me over the chat. So the first one here is from Nasir, Andy. So let's say if we purchase a house with a unit already and we want to legalize it, do we need to completely rebuild? And if it was existing since 1992 but non-conforming?
Okay. Nasir, that's a good question. And so if it's non-conforming, if it existed in 1992, it's incumbent on you to prove that it existed in 1992 if you want to consider it a legal unit. So anything that was built after anything that was built before November 1995, you're not subject to the bylaws because they actually didn't have restrictions on secondary units. But that's not to say that you didn't need a building permit at that time to build it, because if at that time you built it, you still had to comply with the building code, with the electrical code, with the plumbing code, and all of that. So really, it depends on how it was built. So I've had situations where the unit was built prior to 1995 and it was proven with old MLS listings, even like old lease agreements and documentation to show that it was occupied and there were tenants there. It was prior to 1995, but the city didn't have any indication that there was a building permit taken out for it. So in those cases, they would be exempt from any of the bylaw restrictions. So for example, parking, lot sizes, even zoning, locations and things like that. They would be exempt from that, but they wouldn't be exempt from the building code, especially the fire code, right? That would be the biggest one. Sometimes they would probably overlook like slight building code issues, right? So, you know, building heights and things like that, they may overlook that, but in terms of fire separation, in terms of smoke alarms, in terms of egress windows, those are certain things that they definitely want to make sure that it is up to today's standard. Okay, so hopefully that answers your question, Nasir.
All right, perfect. Thanks, Andy. All right, Stephen, I've unmuted you. Go ahead and ask your questions if...
Hey, Andy, this is Stephen. So
Hey,
I have two questions about like working with contractors. So
Yes.
Question one, so what are some of the most important questions to ask when interviewing general contractor? And the second question is, what can we add to the contractor renovation contract to protect ourselves? Can we do things like penalty clause for delay, progress reporting obligations, and like ask for written explanation if delay is beyond reasonable?
Yeah. You can really ask for whatever you want, but the contractor can also deny your request, right? That's what it really comes down to. And quite frankly, Stephen, right now, at this stage, any good contractor is, you know, they sort of, for lack of a better word, have the upper hand right now because they are in such demand. So if you were to include things like penalty clauses and things like that for delays, you know, I highly doubt that they're going to take on your contract because all of my clients, they're in dire need of a good contractor, right? So it's not that there aren't contractors out there, there just aren't enough good ones, enough ones that are qualified, okay? So, you know, you can certainly ask for those things, you know, they have the right to accept it or not. And, you know, they're, you know, a lot of times they're turning away work just because, they, you know, they don't have the manpower to do the work. Now, in terms of your other question about sort of some of the questions, the most important questions that you can ask them to qualify them, there are, you know, literally hundreds of questions. But, you know, if you still want to be able to hire the right contractor, right? So I would definitely say that, you know, if you are doing a major renovation, you know, whether it's a basement suite or whether it's a rear addition, whether you're building a garage or a second-story addition, they should be very comfortable with working with permit drawings that were approved by the city and also working with city inspectors. That's really a good filter that would probably filter out 50% of the contractors out there, right? If they don't, you know, feel comfortable getting it inspected, right? It's like, you know, if you're going to do the proper job, you really have nothing to hide. I know it's not always easy to deal with inspectors, but you know, anybody that's legitimate will ensure that they do work that will pass the test of city inspectors. And then also the other thing is, depending on what their trade is, they have the proper licensing, and then the insurance that we talked about, right? So the comprehensive general liability and the WSIB insurance. Those would be the major things.
All right, perfect. Okay, I got a question here from Salima. I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly. So do you have any experience working with side splits in a semi or detached home? And if so, is there any difference in terms of the city requirements entrance shared?
So to answer that first part, yes, I have. The very first side split I've done is my own house that I'm in right now. That is a back split, and so it's instead of one floor and a basement, it's half a basement, half a lower floor, half a main floor, and half of an upper floor. So we have it split up and legalized through the city of Scarborough. So I've done it. I've done side splits as well. I've done a back split that is a semi, okay? And so you really have creativity to do secondary units on any type of property that you want. Some of you might be familiar with Ryan Carr. He does these vertical splits out in Durham, where he will take a semi-detached two-story house and split the main floor in half so that the lower tenant actually gets partial main floor, and it's more appealing. So you can do everything as long as it's within the confines of the code. So the building code is sort of a bare minimum on what needs to be done to meet the standards, and you can go above and beyond that. So yeah, every city will allow it as long as you don't do anything that contradicts the building code. I don't know of any specific bylaws that will prevent you from doing any sort of secondary unit on a side split house, on a split level house.
All right, perfect. Yeah, you know, and Ryan Carr does a phenomenal job on those vertical splits.
Yeah.
So if anybody's interested, I plan on having Ryan Carr out later on this year at one of our next mastermind events, so you can keep an eye out for that. Another question here from Connor. So does St. Catharines allow for tandem parking?
Yes, they do. That's the shortest answer I'll provide tonight. Yes, they do.
All right, that's good, short and sweet.
Yeah.
I've actually got a question for you, Andy. Now, I know you know, the building code does require that you have to have 6'5" for the basement, for, you know, obviously for most of the area, and obviously along the lines of egress. Now, what about, can you get away with it if it's in a doorway? Because I heard you can, so I don't know how true that is or not.
Yeah, it's a little bit vague when it comes to doorways, because there are a couple of points that seem to be a little bit of contradictory when it comes to doorways, because they will say that if it's in the path of egress, it can't be under 6'5". So if you're in the bedroom and you have to get to the egress, well, that doorway is going to be under 6'5", so that contradicts it. But then there's another part of the code that says that doorways can be lowered if there's ceiling issues, right?
Right.
So really, that really just comes down to the interpretation from either that particular examiner or the inspector. Now, having said that, you know, I've in a lot of situations where I've come across doorways that are, you know, an inch lower, you know, sometimes they'll pass it, but you know, I can't say for sure, right? It depends on that inspector.
Right. All right, Ian. So Ian's got a question. So Ian, hold on. I'll unmute you in a minute. Okay, go ahead, Ian.
Hi Gary. Hi Andy. Thanks for offering this this webinar. It's great. My question. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I'm just saying thanks.
Yeah, my question is regarding some zoning in a property that I was thinking about investing in the West End near Humber College.
Yes. Are
you familiar with some sort of prohibition from the college blocking the builders that are developing new residential areas and new homes in that area from having them rent out to students?
For Humber, no, I'm not familiar with that at all. Sorry.
Okay, no problem.
Yeah. So the easiest thing would be to, I guess, Humber, is it like the Rexdale area?
Yeah, Humber College.
So would that be Etobicoke?
Actually, yeah, it is Etobicoke. Rexdale is just, I believe it's just east of that, east of Highway 27.
Okay. Yeah, so just contact the Etobicoke division of the City Hall. So within the city of Toronto, even though it's one city, they still have it broken down based on the old cities. So you go on to the City of Toronto website building department, they have 5 numbers. One for Etobicoke, one for North York, Scarborough, and then Toronto, East York, and I think York may be together, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so just call the specific location, like Etobicoke, and find out from them.
Okay, I'll do that.
Okay.
Thanks a lot.
Yep, no problem.
All right, thanks for your question, Ian. Okay, here's a good question. This one's from Steven. So how do you get the best, the hardest, and the fastest work from your contractor while keeping a great relationship with them? So pretty much, how do you crack the whip and then at 5 p.m. have a beer with them and still be friends?
Take them out for a beer at lunchtime. I don't know. Yeah, no, that's a good question. I think it's really just about building rapport, right? You know, like I said, good contractors are hard to come by, and you know, if they do good work, then you know, as any other vendor, you know, you basically have to give them a certain amount of leeway, but at the same time, have clear expectations, right? You know, you want to make sure that expectations are clear, scope of work is clear from the get-go. It's just all about communications, especially at the beginning. Yeah, and very important for you yourself to be as educated as possible. Okay, so know the process, learn about it, read about it. You know, spend a weekend going through a book that talks about it and know about it as much as possible. Even if you are hiring a general contractor or a project manager to handle it for you, you want to have a basic understanding of what's involved, right? And then that way your communication with the contractor is going to be a lot more educated. They're going to respect the conversation a lot more. But I mean, you know, it's always challenging when you're starting out, and you know, the more educated you are at the beginning, that's going to set the stage for a good project as well as a good relationship down the road, because you know, you probably want to do this more than once.
All right, perfect. All right, so listen, you know what? I'm going to maybe take on 2 more questions, and then we're going to wrap it up. So I got a question here. How much would it cost to add a separate entrance? So I'm assuming the question is if there isn't a separate entrance already there, and you need to create a new one, what's the cost on something like that, I guess on average?
Sure, yeah. So I'll talk about there's a several, you know, options for second entrances. The easiest one a lot of people overlook is obviously it's a shared entrance and then the foyer, and then you split it into 2, one for each unit. Some people don't want to have that. They don't want to share that entrance, especially if it's a nice house. They want to have the main unit occupant, you know, having their own entrance. And then the second option I would go with, obviously, you know, that cost is going to be you know, relatively inexpensive if you're just separating a wall. And then the second option would be actually to create a wall, create a door opening into the house, possibly with a window somewhere, so that you're not doing anything structural. There's already a lintel support, so all you have to do is cut down to create the door, and then create a stairwell on the floor system inside, right? Then you're not messing with the structure. Well, you are, excuse me, I shouldn't say that. You're not doing anything exterior with the foundation structure, but you still are doing something with the floor structure. That still may need some engineering involved. And then the last resort is a basement walkout. There are a few reasons I don't encourage people to do basement walkouts, and in the 30+ conversions I've worked on, we've never done a basement walkout. Either one existed or they already had separate entrance going in there. The reason why I avoid that is because A, it's very expensive. So to do it properly, you're probably looking at $20,000. Anybody that can do it for less than that, I'd be wary of it. And then also you're potentially compromising the structure. So to do it properly, you need to have either the underside of that basement walkout needs to be really well insulated, or you need to lower the footing of the foundation at the basement walkout portion of it, because when you dig out a basement walkout, the frost line goes lower as well. And I've seen numerous basement walkouts that were added in after the fact when I was doing inspections with houses, and it's clear it wasn't done properly with or without a permit, and you see a huge crack in the basement floor near that walkout is because frost has gone underneath and has caused the portion of the house to heave. Okay, so not to say that it can't be done, but you really need to know the quality of work of the contractor that's going to be doing it, and definitely that needs to be engineered. So you need an engineer's drawing to be able to do that properly. Okay, so I would say 20 grand and up.
Okay. And obviously, it seems like the theme obviously is, you've got to make sure that you're working with a good contractor. You've obviously been doing this for a while, Andy. Do you have contractors that you recommend, and obviously different cities that you've been in, that, if somebody wants to use a contractor, that you can recommend them?
Yeah, so so I have a list of general contractors. I have lists of individual tradespeople that would do things like that are specific to secondary units, such as alarm systems, in-duct smoke detectors, plumbers, and things like that. And those people, for my clients, I'm happy to share those facts with my clients.
All right, perfect. Okay, so listen, one last question here from Derek Kwok. So what are the requirements for fire suppression and integrated fire detection?
Sorry, can you repeat that? I just missed that first part.
Yeah, no problem. So what are the requirements for fire suppression and integrated fire detection?
So fire suppression, if I understand that correctly, it's what happens if a fire occurs, and if that's the correct, that's my correct understanding, then the fire separation is what suppresses the fire. So if you have on a house that is under 5 years, you want to have a 45-minute separation between the units, which is typically your safe and sound insulation, and 2 layers of drywall in order to obtain the 45-minute separation. If it's older than 5 years, then you can use 30 minutes of separation, which will give you just 1 layer of the 5/8 of drywall. So the suppression will define the time that it takes for fire to travel from one unit to the other, so that occupants can evacuate should there be a fire in a timely manner. And then in terms of detection, you are required to have, in both units, you are required to have smoke alarms that are both hardwired, which means it's connected to the electrical panel, and it has to be interconnected within the unit, not between the units, but within the unit. And now you also are required to have a strobe feature on that smoke alarm. So for people who are hearing impaired, it's a really bright light that you can see even with your eyes closed. And that is required. They aren't cheap, but are required for 2-unit houses. They're required in every bedroom, and also you have to have one in the hallways as well. Hope that answers the question.
Yep. No, it does. All right, perfect. So Andy, listen, thank you very much for doing the webinar with us tonight. I really appreciate it. And everybody on the call, I know we definitely went over time, but I think everybody seemed to enjoy it, based on the questions, and a lot of people still hanging on as well too. So thank you very much. Andy, I don't know if there's anything that you wanted to add to before we sign off.
No, nothing. I think we covered a lot tonight, and I just want to thank you, Gary, for allowing me to speak to your audience and to share some of my recent insights. And thank you, everyone, for attending. I know it's a late night, and I know most of you probably have to get to work tomorrow. So I do appreciate you staying on this late to hear me speak. Appreciate that.
Yeah, I mean, the good thing with these is that, people can at least lay in their bed and in their PJs listening to this, right? So it's good.
Yeah, no driving after this, so that's good.
Yeah, all right, perfect. All right, Andy, so thank you very much again. I appreciate it, and we'll definitely have you out for whenever upcoming mastermind events out here in Ajax. So again, appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you, Gary.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Have yourselves a great night, and we'll see you and hopefully talk to you guys soon. Take care.